There may be no greater opportunity for home growers than to invest in their soil in the fall. And I can guarantee most of the people in your area who are trying to improve their garden soil are going to miss that opportunity this year. But you don't have to. I'm Taylor. I help gardeners grow in more sustainable and regenerative ways that bless the soil and lead to long-lasting fertility and abundance. And over the past 5 years, I've been exploring the best of the best growing techniques. If you would like to get weekly insights and ideas on ways that you can bring abundance to your garden, you can sign up for my email newsletter. 5 minutes a week is all it takes to become a better gardener. And now let's get into what you can do right now to invest in your soil. There are 3 things that I'm going to go over for the rest of this video. Things that you can collect, things that you can make, and things that you can apply. So starting with things that you can collect. And to illustrate this, I want to tell you just a quick story about my first year gardening. And I'll be honest, Cassidy and I had some pretty ambitious goals. We had grand intentions of converting our useless front yard lawn into a thriving Back to Eden style food forest. And I quickly figured out that I was going to need a lot of wood chips to make that happen. So May rolls around, which is right toward the beginning of our growing season here in Eastern Washington, Zone 6B. And I confidently call up a local tree service company. One of my first jobs ever was helping my dad rake up wood chips after he would grind out stumps in people's yards. And I remember sometimes we needed a place to dump those wood chips, so why not try and take them off the tree company's hands? Called him up and I said, hey, I was wondering if you could dump a load of wood chips the next time that you've got a project in my area. And the guy said back, yeah, you and pretty much everyone else starting a garden, huh? Now here's the thing. There are 2 major times of the year that everyone is doing yard projects, spring and fall. Probably because it's not too hot or cold out. But no one is starting a garden in the fall. And that's why you should. I remember trying to call other arborists in the area and I couldn't really get anyone to dump the chips at my house. But that fall, after the first frost came and people were still getting trees chopped down, but no one wanted the chips anymore. So I called the tree service again and they said, how much do you want? Literally, it was that simple, night and day difference. Time of the year mattered. They dumped a huge truck full and literally texted me a few days later asking, do you want more? We've got a job in your area. Okay, what's the lesson there? Because it's more than just wood chips. People in every neighborhood that I've ever lived in are doing this thing where they bag up the leaves that fell off of their trees. And either they take those bags to the yard waste center or they get it picked up and taken away. But out of the dozens of people that I have asked if I could take those leaves off their hands, no one has ever refused me, to my memory. I've gotten maybe a weird look or two. For the most part, people are thrilled that you might want their trash. Now, you might be wondering, why do I want their trash? And there are a lot of reasons, which we'll get into in the next category. Other than wood chips and leaves though, there are other things that people are getting rid of as they do their wintering process. Some people like to decorate their homes around this time of the year with pumpkins or straw bales or gourds. Businesses too, by the way. And you know what gets old to have on your porch? Rotten pumpkins and gourds. Your neighborhood and local businesses are going to be happy to let you have them. Again, if you don't know why I'm telling you to collect these things yet, just hang tight. Straw or hay bales are another festive seasonal thing that a lot of people don't really know what to do with after Halloween. And then there's the rest of the just general yard cleanup stuff, like sticks and branches and logs that people are chopping up and stacking by their shed, even though they don't even have a wood stove or a fire pit or any intention of burning it. If you know someone who owns livestock, like horses or mules, cows or goats, now is actually likely a great time to ask them for some of that manure. If you don't know anyone with livestock, I have had incredibly good luck with Facebook Marketplace. Depending on your area, people are likely wanting to offload some of that manure that's piled up over the summer. Sometimes they'll deliver it for a small fee, but I've also had people deliver manure for free because they literally just had too much. This stuff is an incredible resource if you're trying to start or expand your garden for next growing season. A few other things that you might want to collect around this time of year, since no one else is thinking about their gardens, are waste streams from local businesses. So coffee shops are often thrilled to offload their used coffee grounds to you. Sometimes if they're hip, they'll even have a coffee grounds bag deposit near the door and you can just come in and pick them up. Breweries have a waste stream, spent grains. These are just the leftover grains that have had their starches extracted during the brewing process, but they still contain a lot of protein and fiber and are totally worth scooping up if you have have got a brewery nearby who's just tossing them in the garbage otherwise. And the last thing that I'll recommend trying to source around this time is cardboard, particularly big pieces of cardboard. These are, again, on the list of things that businesses are often just tossing away. Okay, if I missed anything, I would love to hear in the comments, what are people in your area getting rid of or eager to let you take off their hands once you ask around this time of year? In the next category, things that you can make, we're gonna talk about what you can do with all this stuff. And then we'll get into a few other things that are easy to make around this time of year. And so starting with the most obvious one, compost. If you have put off starting a compost heap, take this as a sign, this is the year. And not only is this your year, this is the season to do it. Because with all of this material that you're able to collect, you have the chance to start a fat compost pile, or maybe even a couple, or still a small windrow. And it all depends on what your goals are, how much you want to make. But let's just talk about why you want to start a compost pile now. First of all, I think it's safe to say very few gardeners have ever found themselves saying, you know, I think I've just got too much high quality compost on my hands. I think I'm just going to have to get rid of it. That's not really the problem in my experience. In fact, it's almost always the exact opposite. To feed your garden soil organic matter, to feed it nutrients that is going to provide microorganisms in the soil with food to break down and help plants grow, quality compost is just so helpful. And this kind of comes down to the reason why we make compost in the first place. We're taking a lot of the components of soil organic matter and we're combining it, mixing it up, getting the microbial quality locked in, and then we're pre-decomposing that material more quickly so that our plants can benefit sooner. So let's just break that down one step at a time. We've got our wood chips and leaves and straw on the one hand, and then we've got our pumpkins, our manure, our coffee grounds, spent grains on the other. And I'm splitting these into carbon-rich materials and nitrogen-rich materials. And you need both to make compost that will be ready before spring planting, preferably a bit earlier if you can, actually. So when we combine these ingredients together in roughly equal amounts, the microbes on the ingredients now in the pile have a well-balanced diet and they'll start to get to work decomposing the materials for you. And if you've ever made a compost pile, the way that you'll know that the microbes are at work is because they're going to generate a lot of heat. And the size of the pile, however high you stack it, is going to help retain that heat, which is a favorable environment for the beneficial microbes and an unfavorable environment for the bad microbes. The heat of that pile is also going to kill off weed seeds and rhizomes in the pile so that you don't have to spread those all over your garden. In a sense, the heat generated from the hot compost pile is going to sort of pasteurize the materials. It's giving them a clean slate, and then it's simultaneously re-inoculating themselves with the beneficial microbial cultures. It's sort of like taking an antibiotic and then following it up with a probiotic, but better because the probiotics never fully die off. The reason I'd say this time of the year is such a good time to make a pile like this is because there's that first month of lots of microbial activity. And then once the pile cools down, it will still benefit from decomposition. So once your pile heats up on its own, it'll cool down on its own. And then those beneficial microbes are locked in and will work on the materials, breaking them down into soil all winter long. You've got options here. You can just leave your pile freestanding or in the bay for this period of time, or you can spread it out over your garden beds, and we'll return to why you might want to go with one route or the other in part 3. But there are actually a few other things that you might consider starting making right now for similar reasons to making compost, because it just takes a little while and it's nice to have a good head start before the next growing season. If you've been learning about making your own inputs, fertilizers, natural pesticides, microbial inoculants, but have put off making them, now is a great time to start those. Starting with one of the best things that I can think of, I think a lot of people can make for their garden next to compost, is biochar. And especially if you live in a super dry environment where it gets scorching hot during the summer, like me, you're gonna wanna take advantage of the off season for making charcoal if you're gonna go the homemade route. And this is where those neighbors' sticks and logs and branches come into play. Of course, you don't want to be burning fresh cut material, preferably something that has had some time to age for a while and something that's relatively dry. But with the burn bans in my area lifted, steam activated charcoal is definitely on the list of garden inputs that I'll be making. You can check out our other videos if you want to know how to make your own charcoal at home, but there are tons of ways you can do this. The simplest being just digging a cone-shaped hole in the ground away from any structures or flammable objects, of course, and then burning material using the kontiki method, which just means you're gradually layering on more wood pieces as they start to turn to ash you're limiting the oxygen in the lower layers of the pile. This is a great time, in my opinion, to do that. Also, because you can use it right away in your compost piles, or if you apply it to your garden now, you're most likely going to give it the proper amount of time over winter to adsorb all of those nutrients in the soil. Again, won't say too much more about charcoal here. You can check out our other videos if that's something that you've been looking to get into. As far as other inputs that you can get started now that take a while to make, I'd highly recommend starting a batch of fermented fish amino acids, or FAA, from the Korean Natural Farming Playbook. Chop up some fish waste, mix it with equal parts brown sugar, and press it down into a fermentation vessel. Those fish pieces are going to slowly decompose over the next 6 months, and by the time you get to the start of the growing season, you should have at least some usable fish fertilizer. Great stuff to have on hand to give your garden a boost in the early weeks as things are getting started of the next growing season. Sticking with Korean natural farming, you've got other long-term projects too, like Oriental Herbal Nutrient, or OHN, that is a 2.5 month long process to make. If you're into vinegar making, and now is a great time to start that, since depending on how you make your vinegar, it can take a good amount of time. We might come out with a video here soon though on some ways that you can speed up that process. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. If you're growing on a larger scale and you want to try out some of the more chemically precise Jadam natural pesticide inputs, now would be a great time to start those projects, since they can be sort of a trial and error process, and it's nice to give yourself some time to collect those materials for those. I'm thinking specifically about the Jadam sulfur recipe and the recipe for Jadam wetting agent, which is basically a Castile soap. Beyond your liquid gardening inputs, there are a few other things that I'd say now is a great time to make, and that would be your worm bin and your bokashi bin. If you've been holding off on getting either of these projects started or trying them out, again, now is a great time to do it, mostly because you're not dealing with the hustle and bustle of seed starting and planting. And these two bins are just amazing ways to turn food waste that you generate in the winter into soil. Earthworms can only take veggies and fruit peels, whereas bokashi bins can take any food waste. That being said, as you're deciding which of these that you might want to pursue, you can consider a couple things. The benefit of a worm bin, right, is that they are very easy to maintain. It's easy to feed. You can just toss your food scraps on top of the bin, and then depending on your setup, you can put another bin on top once your lower bin fills up, or you just remove the contents of the worm bin and reserve some of the worms for your next batch. The thing with worms is that they're going to help you process your food scraps into soil right there in the bin. So there's not too much further processing to be done once you've got the worm castings, and then you can just put those straight into the garden, let them do their thing. Worm castings are also great to have on hand for when you're making potting mix, or if you just want to add them to your store-bought mix. For bokashi, on the other hand, the benefits here are pretty obvious. You're able to turn meat, dairy, and cooked foods into soil. The downsides being that it takes a little bit longer to get them there, and in this case, if this is your first introduction to bokashi, this is a process where, strange as it sounds, we ferment food waste, and that's going to prepare it for decomposition in the soil. And the reason we're able to do this with meat products is because of the cultures that we're using to ferment them. They're pre-digesting the meat, which then makes it easier for the soil microbes to decompose once we put it in the soil. Bokashi is also a great addition to compost piles, by the way. The contents from the bokashi buckets are a great nitrogen source if you're running low there. Point is, bokashi bins are wonderful to have on hand so that you don't have to throw away your leftovers that sat in the back of the fridge just too long and now they smell a little fishy. Just admit it, we've all done it. Worm bins are wonderful to have on hand so you can toss your fruit and veggie scraps on in. Both are building you soil all winter long. Set them up now and you'll be happy that you did next spring when you're planting into beautiful garden soil. All you gotta do is take that first step and set up your bin. If you want an easy way to remember what all you can feed your worms or your bokashi, we've got a cheat sheet that you can download that conveniently puts them side by side. Print it out, put it on the fridge, and that'll get you started. You can also check out our other videos on how to set up either of these bins. Now, with so many opportunities to collect and so much to make, there comes a time when we actually want to get this stuff into our soil. And that's our third and final category, things we can apply. And so to start, let's take a look back at our compost materials. I said earlier, we get our pile to heat up, right, over time, and then it cools down on its own. And then once it's locked in those beneficial microbes, we can either leave it to further decompose or put it out on our garden. I'm just gonna share with you how I personally think about this, and you can decide what's good for you. I like to keep some of the materials in the compost zone, right? That pile that I created, and I like those to have a few more months to break down. And the reason for that is that I like to make my own potting mix in the late winter. And one of the key ingredients for my potting mix recipe, is compost. And in my experience, if you can give those plants a good start at life from the second that they germinate, you're much more likely to have healthy plants into maturity. So I consider the compost that I'm making the best quality stuff I could be giving them. Hence, I like to save a little bit of my fall compost pile to decompose so that it's ready to sift in the midwinter months and use in my potting mix recipe. Maybe you've got your potting mix figured out, don't worry about it. For the rest of my compost, I like to spread it out on my garden beds as soon as it is cooled off, if I can. Sometimes, let's be honest, I don't get to making that a priority, but generally speaking, it's so helpful to just get that sweet, microbe-rich, nutrient-dense compost spread out over your garden beds as soon as possible, because it'll do a couple things if you do. One, it's gonna give the earthworms time to travel up into the compost, and they're gonna help you mix it up into the upper layers of your garden soil. Earthworms are attracted to organic matter. If possible, you really want them mixing this into the soil for you rather than manually tilling it in. And the next thing that's gonna happen is that it's gonna give the other microbes from the compost and in the soil the chance to integrate into your soil. So letting your compost finish its decomposition process on the soil where it's gonna be throughout the growing season is kind of ideal. One last thing on compost, remember the cardboard that I mentioned you might wanna collect right about now. Cardboard is an excellent organic weed barrier. And you've probably heard of this simple technique if you're into no-till growing at all, but a simple cardboard compost combo is a great way to establish new garden beds in weedy areas or where you've got turf grass growing. Put the cardboard down, pile up compost 6 inches high on top of it, and if you do it right at the beginning of winter, you'll have a reasonably well-established garden bed come spring. Now, if you want to skip the compost making part of the process, you can totally do that and try out something called lasagna bed gardening. And this is basically where you just make a shorter compost pile straight onto your garden beds or where you want to start new garden beds. And then you just let that decompose and integrate all winter long. That freezing, thawing cycle really does work on your materials. It kind of breaks up the texture. You might know about that if you've ever froze, thawed, and then refroze and thawed food. The texture starts to become a little bit mushy. Not ideal for tasty food, super ideal though for making tasty soil. The only thing to keep in mind here is that if you are gonna go the lasagna garden bed approach, is that if you've got weed seeds in there, those will germinate come spring. If you're using animal manure, you can believe that those have weed seeds in there, and that's the benefit of composting them in advance, is that you get to the chance to kill off a lot of those weed seeds. As with everything, trade-offs. Another couple very similar things that are great to get off the ground right now are your mulches and your pathways. And this is just something that I really focus on because I think wood chip pathways specifically are severely underrated. You can leave paths bare or plant a grass or clover over wherever you want. Thing is, if it's so dry where we grow, that the wood chips are a really great thing to have covering the soil for us. They help the water retention and they're passively feeding the fungi in our garden. For the same reason as with the compost, I like to get these down well before the growing season begins. Also, it's just nice to be able to get the work out of the way so that you can wake up in the spring and your garden's all ready to go. Beyond your more bulky organic materials, there are two other things that you have the chance to add now. And I'll preface just by saying, if you get compost made and spread, you're doing great, and you might be able to just stop there. However, if you'd like to take it a few steps further, you can also add some mineral supplements now and some microbial inoculants. And again, we're getting into some more advanced territory, but stick around if you're not familiar with this sort of thing, because it could potentially really get your garden off to a great start if you do this now. First of all, our nutrients. Here we've got a bunch of options. If you want to just apply a broad spectrum of micronutrients, you could use something like azomite. I really appreciate this stuff because a little goes a long way, and it's just going to supply the soil with lots of trace minerals and other stuff. But if you live near the sea, you could actually use some of the seawater to remineralize your soil and add a bit of microbial activity while you're at it. And I know you're thinking, seawater on the soil, oh brother. And yeah, if you were to just dump seawater straight onto your soil, you might overdo it and cause a temporary imbalance on your soil. Don't do that. Instead, you want to take that seawater and dilute it 1:30 in dechlorinated water. And that's what you pour as a soil drench over your garden. Don't apply it undiluted. A little really goes a long way. And if you're still sketched out by putting salt at any amount on your garden, let me just explain a little bit of how this works. The purpose of seawater or salt water, if you go the make your own route, and the same with azomite, the purpose is not to give your plants the minerals they need to grow. It's actually to supply the microbes in the soil with the nutrients to process into plant available nutrients. And this is definitely getting technical, which is what we tend to do on this channel. But with good, healthy, robust microbial communities in your soil, a lot of the nutritional imbalances will get sorted out on their own. Salt that would otherwise dehydrate and burn your plants actually helps round out the microbial environment for the beneficial microorganisms. And then it gets processed and broken down and utilized as plant available nutrients. But that can't happen without the help from microorganisms. So the second thing here, and the last thing that I'll talk about as we explore what 99% of gardeners will not do this fall, is applying beneficial microbes to the soil. As always, we've got options here. There's no one size fits all option. But what I really want to encourage you guys to try is using some indigenous microorganisms. We just released a full breakdown of how to cultivate indigenous microorganisms, or IMOs. And if you have some finished IMO4, now is a great time to get that on your soil and water it in. But if you missed the window for catching and culturing those microbes, I've actually got a great option for you, and that is the Jadam microbial solution. If you're unfamiliar, Jadam microbial solution, or JMS, is a way to culture microbes found in the forest so that they can be applied to your garden soil. And please watch one of our more thorough videos on this process if you're eager to try this out. I'll give you a short rundown here so that you can kind of get a sense of what you might be getting into. Get out into an undisturbed forest and look beneath the leaf litter that's accumulated on the forest floor. You want to look in deciduous forests because the microbial populations living underneath the litter there is going to be most diverse there. Scoop up some of that soil, the stuff beneath the leaves, and bag it up. You only need a little bit depending on how much space that you're growing in. 1/2 cup per gallon of water is what you'll need per batch, so keep that in mind. I like to just collect maybe a couple gallons worth of soil for the year and make sure to look in parts of the forest that are clearly thriving and not diseased. You're trying to collect the best microbes available to you. Once you've got your leaf mold soil, you're going to culture it by dissolving it in water along with some sea salt and a carbohydrate source. You can use cooked grains or cooked potato, and they need to be blended up into sort of runny, slurry substance so that the microbes in the soil can fully access them and use them to multiply. Once the brew has started to foam and bubble, you know that the microbes are active, and then you're just waiting for the foam to form a disc, sort of disc on the top of the water. And once you reach peak foam, you're ready to apply it to your garden soil. And you can use this as a soil drench, meaning that it can be applied undiluted where there are no plants. It's also recommended that you apply it right before or during heavy rain, since the extra water will help carry the microbes downward into the soil. Now, if it's cold outside, you're going to want to brew your JMS indoors so that the microbes can stay active. And also, this is a great solution to make just about any time of year, honestly. But applying it over the top of your compost right now, after you've applied your minerals and mulch, is just going to sort of seal the deal for your soil as it overwinters. JMS is a great way to inoculate your soil before the hard frosts come. I like to use it at the end of the growing season and at the beginning of the growing season, during the growing season. It's great year round, but I highly recommend practicing this right now if possible. You can also use it to wet down your compost pile after it's cooled down, and it'll infuse your compost with beneficial microbes. It's just great stuff. All right, friends, that is everything that you can do right now that 99% of gardeners will, in my estimation, wait too long to do. Use this time to its fullest potential to get your garden ready for next growing season. Use these techniques if you're breaking new ground, expanding your growing operation. I would love to hear about people's plans in the comments for how they intend to implement some of these things or how they have in the past. And let us know if there are other opportunities that I missed in this video for using this time of the year to its fullest potential. If you want to get started making your own compost at home, which is one of the best things that you can do for your garden, check out this video next. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.